Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And as you can tell from the title, today's epic fantasy review video is all about the first two issues of the 2003 Dark Horse run of Conan. This is a great run from the little I've read of it. The first two issues are astoundingly good, incredibly well drawn. The art is really good. The characterization is fascinating, and the dialogue is mostly perfect. But there's a frame narrative with the story, which is a very interesting one. So let's jump right on in. The story starts with a frame narrative in issue 0. That is to say, it starts with a prince who has been cast, not exactly out, but he's essentially been exiled by his father from the capital city. And he is crown prince, and he's from a well-formed society. But the thing is, his dad is obviously venal and gluttonous, and has sent him out to the fringes of the kingdom to try to squeeze this region, which is mentioned as being inhabited primarily by tribal people, of its gold, wealth, and resources. But the prince is not happy. He's bored, spoilt, and just less than fond of his father, who's not a very good man and who doesn't care for him. So right from the start, we have an interesting character in this crown prince who he seems to be longing for a father, even as he's fascinated by knowledge and is a bit of a scholar. When upon arrival, he's informed that some of their diggers have found something, so they're doing a bit of an archaeological dig. He is accompanied by a royal vizier by the name of Wazil, who seems to treat him rather contemptuously. The crown prince, though, goes down into the caverns the diggers have been digging through. There is a treasure trove of wealth that's discovered, as this was apparently a tomb for a king who is long since deceased. And upon a giant throne is carved the likeness of a man by the name of Conan, a Cimmerian. That last part, it's like Bond, James Bond. The thing is, Wasil tries to dismiss it very forcibly, but the crown prince says no. Now, this is where the story gets an old mythological and especially European reference here, in that the people predicted that he would come back in their darkest hour. This is already reminiscent of Frederick Barbarossa, Charlemagne, and even King Arthur, King Under the Mountain, who will one day return as the once and future king to rescue his nation from its darkest hour, probably around Judgment Day or something. Or so goes the folk tale that surrounds Arthur, Charlemagne, and Frederick Barbarossa. Wasil is not fond of this little prophecy and says he was obviously a tyrant. That said, the prince, though, doesn't believe it and says, well, they obviously longed for him. That's not fear. That's love. You've got Wasil, who is ordered to assemble a chronicle of this Conan and to collect all local folk tales and stories of oral histories of Conan, for which Wasil is enraged and annoyed. He then presents vast store of information, especially the chronicles that are assembled by the Nemedian scholars and scribes, which serves to further enrage Wasil because, as he notes, the Nemedians were obsessed with chronicling everything. And he's enraged because he doesn't actually want to tell the story, and he seems determined to blacken the memory of this figure in the historic memory. It is a rather common thing that happens throughout history where the popular figure of one country has his reputation blackened by enemy nations, and then they force their defeated foe to adopt their histories. The idea is the victor writes history to an extent. That's not always true, but there's a kernel of truth to it. That said, Wasil ends up reading from the Nemedian Chronicle and hesitates when he gets to the under his sandaled feet he was destined to trod over the various jeweled thrones of the earth. I have my suspicions regarding Wasil. I think that it's actually Fafaman, and that he's found a way to extend his life or return from the realm of the dead.
It sounds like something he'd do.
He has snake eyes and his pupils are green. Wasil, I mean. And so I think it's Fafaman, and that he's trying to blacken the memory of Conan, either erase it, and if he can't erase it, he wants to destroy all positive memories of Conan, because that was his rival. He hates Conan. This adds an interesting element to the frame narrative, because you basically have Snake Pope, who's trying to wreck Conan's reputation, but he's being made to assemble the record of Conan's life and read all of his positive deeds to a crown prince, whom he obviously detests. So, in a way, it's a rare form of torture for Fafaman. I like this, but I don't know for sure if it's Fafaman. I'm sure someone's read on ahead and could either confirm or deny it. I don't mind if you do in the comment section, but this is such a great issue and such a great possibility.
I am going to add something about that Wasil wants an easily manipulated prince who doesn't think.
But he's not getting that.
Yeah, because I remember the scene when they found all the gold. You had the prince, because the prince was ordered by his father, bring me all the gold.
He's like, yeah, assemble all the treasure. He doesn't care. Another interesting thing is that at the beginning of the issue, you have the legend. Yeah, Conan has become a legend, and it calls him the greatest fantasy hero of all times. Yes, though I'd argue Conan is not fantasy. He's more mythology at this point. He's a folk hero of Texas. The reason I fall more into that camp at this point is that the way Howard was writing and the mindset he had with Conan, same with Tolkien. Like, the thing is, the Hyborian Age and the Legendarium of Tolkien are not like the rest of the fantasy genre. They are not part of the fantasy genre. They're separate. As to this crown prince, obviously, for him, not all treasure and gold can be found in simple rocks. I think for him, the real jewels is the Numidian Chronicles. Issue number 1 is when the story really starts, with the story pretty much starting with the Frost Giant's daughter. Neither Dan nor myself have read the short story yet, but we'll be getting to that at some point because it's obviously a well-written story by Howard. Issue 1 does not get into the whole thing. At the beginning, Wasil is not very keen to really start. He's egged on, and Conan ends up happening upon a raid on an Azerian settlement, it being Vanir men who have raided it, with a young girl carrying off a baby and trying to flee for her life and pleading with one of the Vanir men who goes to slay her until he gets his head lopped off because he was trying to
take advantage.
Conan then proceeds to slay a few more, then challenges the rest, and he just proves himself to be awesome. Honestly, this is a marked contrast, I mean, no offense, to the Roy Thomas Conan, whom we first meet him, he's captured. The 1982 movie showed us Conan as a kid, whom is promptly captured. So typically, I think the main appearance Conan makes in various adaptations is him being captured. Doesn't exactly make for a good first impression. But here, rather than being captured, he's saving a girl and introduces himself as Conan, a Cimmerian, which is how it should be. They end up having a funeral during which they explain their funerary customs, where they burn the corpses of their people. The idea is that the smoke is to serve as a staircase to heaven, whereas if you bury them underground, they'll never reach heaven. So there's a very interesting psychology, and to an extent it was kind of true in that the Vikings later did burn their warriors. Not alive, just after they've fallen. But that said, Conan seems to think, well, this is why we often fight you off from our lands, because what awaits you in the afterlife is essentially Valhalla, while what awaits us in Samaria is nothing but Crom's cold underworld. Jeez, maybe this is why Conan somewhat converted to a few other religions along the way, because either Valhalla or the Utopia of Mitra are probably where he wants to hedge his bets.
Mitra sounds good to me.
Conan is invited to dinner and explains that his grandfather was a man who used to tell him a lot of stories from his own time adventuring, in particular in the South, where his grandpa kind of lived the vagabondish life that Conan later lives, but that Conan's grandfather, who comes from a southern tribe, also ventured north to Hyperborea, where he met with people who were immortal, who had every luxury and pleasure at their disposal, who, when they'd tire of life, would jump off a ledge to their doom. And their response is from some of his hosts, wow, we'd like to see that. And you have Conan, I don't really care about immortality, I just want to see the beautiful sights there. Of course, he's invited to come along for a bit of wartime raiding, Viking style, except on land, not at sea, to which he's very eager. But that night he spends his time with the chieftain's daughter, Henga, who apparently decided to kind of give her boyfriend the cold shoulder and favor Conan, which
of course the ladies are going to choose him.
The issue ends with Conan and this tribe's warriors setting out, with this probably being the first bit of the Frost Giant's daughter. I'm not sure because I've not read that story yet. As to the themes, we can't fully examine it until we've read the whole thing, but what it shows us is that, at least in the context of this comic, Conan was always very close to his grandfather, whom assumed a role of wise man within the family. And I think it's his father's father rather than his mother's father, because it would be very Howardian for it to be his father's father. And no comments about the whole Monty Python thing, their fathers.
And you just mentioned it.
After all, what have the Aquilonians ever done for us? In all, the art in these two issues is incredible. The characterization is quite good. You get strong sense of the individual characters, such as when Conan is talking of the wonders his grandfather told him about, he's visibly awestruck. On the other hand, just before a battle, he's visibly eager for the bout. So this is a very young Conan. He has all the hallmarks of later Conan. And now to rate these two issues. Typically prefer to rate issue 1 with the rest of the Frost Giant's daughter story, but just as a standalone, I'd say probably 2.5. But issue 0, I'd say probably a 3.5. It's the perfect prelude.
3.25 for issue 0 because it leaves you wanting more. And
issue 1?
Issue 1 starts at, as you mentioned, a 2.5.
Now, as a youth, I didn't like frame narratives. As I've gotten older, I've come to really love them. And I love the frame narrative in this one, with Wasil basically being implied to be Fa-Fa-Mon. I like the idea that he's probably without his powers, and he's being forced to add to the legend of Conan against his will. Appreciate that and find it funny. On the other hand, there's a creepy vibe to him.
Yeah.
We are seeing Conan from the point of view of an almost middle age, between that of the Hyborian age and the next age, which is kind of our age in a way. What I mean by this is that something like these set during the era of the Scorpion Kings, that is to say from around 54 BCE to around 33 BC, so that you almost get a intervening age between the Hyborian age and our current age. And so this is very Howardian, and the frame narrative also works really well in helping to frame Conan's adventures and stories. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button, as though you were Conan and Zenobia taking down a pack of zombies on their honeymoon.